Hope you all had a good night last night. I'm Deborah Turness, CEO of ITN, and I am delighted to introduce Tim Davie, BBC Director General. Tim took over his job at the BBC almost exactly a year ago, in the midst of a global pandemic, during an efficiency drive, and at the time when the BBC had just decided to take away free TV licenses for over 75s. There's lots to talk about. So much coming out of yesterday too. So for the next 30 minutes, we're going to talk about the themes emerging from yesterday, about your first year in the post, what the future holds for BBC. By trade, I'm a journalist, you're a news junkie. In a minute, I'm going to ask you a few newsy questions, but first, when you watch that video, how does it make you feel?
Proud. Simple as that. It's been a hell of a year. That's what I think. I mean, if you look at it, you've got to say, despite, I mean, we'll talk about all the joys, in inverted commas, of the job, but when you really look at that, that's what audiences care about. And it's a real source of pride. It really is.
So let's hit this morning's papers, because they are awash with
as ever
stories related to the BBC, right? Yeah. Has Nadine Dorries been in touch yet?
We had to make contact, but yeah, I'm really looking forward to meeting and getting stuck in.
Does her appointment as Culture Secretary tell you anything about the government's intentions around the licence fee?
I think it's too early to kind of make too many conclusions. It won't surprise you to say that, but one of the things I've learned, actually, I mean, I think we're on 10 culture secretaries in the last 10 years. And even a year ago, you know, in this kind of forum, we were debating maybe a special advisor's view on decriminalisation. And I think the key thing that I found out is actually we need a really serious grown-up dialogue with government to talk about what we want to do with this industry, the BBC's place in it. I care desperately about the creative industries. I mean, we've got an opportunity, this group have got an opportunity to create up to 1 million jobs in the creative industries between now and 2030. It's an incredibly important topic. So, look, there'll always be a bit of theatre around some of the dynamics of, appointments, but the truth is, we'll sit down, have a proper dialogue around the BBC, and I look forward to it.
But can you have that grown-up dialogue when the person in position to have the conversation has said that the BBC is a bloated organisation, outdated in the modern world, that the structure of the BBC would be more in keeping in a Soviet country, and who fundamentally believes that the non-payment of the licence fee should be decriminalised?
I really wouldn't get too distracted by it. I think at the end of the day, it's all about sitting down with the ministers and the teams and really getting into it. I'm not distracted by it. I think we've got a strong case. We'll probably talk about it. I think we've got a very strong case for investment in the BBC. It's very important. There's a lot of jeopardy now for us and our decisions in the room and with politicians are going to shape the industry. It's great to have the bursary students turning out early, unlike some of the industry. This is not normal, by the way. It really motivates to see them here. Yeah. And what I think we've got to do is have a dialogue at a slightly different level, and that's why I really appreciate the conference, because I think we have to step back a bit and say we've got some big things to do here. And I really enjoy talking about the BBC, creative industries. And I just don't get too distracted by it all. I think there's some really good quality people in government, and we have a constructive conversation.
And we're going to talk about that big picture in just a moment, but I've got a couple more newsy questions to get out of the way. So on the very day that Nadine Dorries walks into her job, BBC confirms that Jess Brammer has been given the job as executive editor of the news channels. Obviously, Jess had previously been critical of the government. It was quite controversial, but appointment in the end. Do you have any fear that the new Culture Secretary might view the appointment as a confirmation of what critics view as the BBC's groupthink?
No. I think there's a couple of points I'd make. One is, I think we run a completely open process. That's how we should do it. I think we're in dangerous territory if, previous political positions, tweets, goodness knows what else, rule you out from BBC jobs. We're hiring people from all walks of life, all wide spectrum of media. It's interesting, because in my life, you're being captured by the government, you're woke warriors, it's all going off. What's clear from my point of view is my expectations as the leader of the organisation for anyone joining our organisation, and that's to leave your politics at the door. But the idea that we're not going to be hiring people with political views in their past or have been in jobs where they have a position, that's not where I want to get to. In fact, I think that's quite dangerous for what it's worth, because you end up in an unmanageable position for the BBC and not great for journalism. So I think Jess is a great hire. She'll do a good job. We've got other jobs in news available at senior level. So there's plenty going on. And what I don't want to do is be in a position where we're not able to hire the best people. But we do, we have clear, we'll talk about that. We have probably, I've set it out very clearly. When you come to the BBC, you leave that behind and you absolutely deliver impartial coverage. And that's what we're here to do.
So not entirely unrelated to that point, are the reports today that Andrew Neil might be making an appearance on Question Time true? And more broadly, could he come back to the BBC?
Well, I haven't spoken to Andrew since his adventures with other broadcasters. He's an outstanding talent. I'm sure he'll get a good gig. We'll see where he ends up. Other cliches are available, Deborah, but that's as good as you're going to get.
Okay. I won't waste our precious 30 minutes on
Let's keep on at that one. Yeah.
So you succeeded Tony Hall on the 1st of September 2020. The Sunday Times quoted friends of yours as saying that every day you open Pandora's box and more bad stuff comes out.
Who are these friends? Can you know? Yeah, I love saucy sayings.
Is that how it feels?
No, I think it's one of those jobs, you don't choose it for a quiet life, do you? And there's rarely 24 hours without something coming up which could absorb your day. Yeah, so we could be all talking about this, that, and the other. I won't even go back to where there's always the news items.
Yeah.
And it's really critical in my job to do a couple of things. And I think Carolyn, Alex, others have all been saying is stepping back, looking at where the market, at the end of the day, we're in a market. And I happen to be a huge advocate of this rather wonderful blend of private money, public intervention. It's not a random coincidence that the creative industry in the UK are, quite frankly, one of our crowning jewels, economically, culturally. This is not an accident. So my view is you have to really step back and say, what are the big things happening? I think it was one of my predecessors who may be here later. I think I may misquote him, but he said something like, sometimes we're clearing litter on the beach when the tsunami's coming in. Yeah? And you've got to be driven by audiences, household behavior, not all the industry stuff as well. And that's what I try and focus on. It's difficult in this job sometimes, because there's just so much noise.
Yeah. And it's shutting out the noise. Well, so let's talk about those priorities you set yourself then as you walked in the door and find out whether you feel you've made progress on them. So you came in with 4 key priorities. Number 1, renewed commitment to impartiality. Number 2, a focus on high-impact content. Number 3, to extract more from online. And number 4, to build commercial income.
Indeed.
Could you scorecard yourself on those 4 goals?
Yeah, we're doing pretty well. The whole thing... pretty well, but so much to do. It's like exhausting in terms of just thinking just how much we've got to do. But I would say the first thing was all of those things were in service of one thing. And I am slightly obsessed by it, which is value to every household. The truth is, again, I am very focused on it, which is I'm a huge believer of this intervention, the BBC. But it is underpinned by households thinking they get a great deal for £159. It's not enough for them just to think it's a good thing for the country. They've got to get that value. And all those 4 things, Deborah, are the underpinnings, and that's why we focused on them as a team in the BBC, is they are the underpinnings of that value. If you trust someone, if you really believe it, and by the way, I think we've made some progress, so a kind of decent result so far in terms of resetting ourselves, making sure we're delivering impartiality. It's simple delivery. It's not just words. I think it's how we covered the regional, national elections. What's the detail of that? How did we do? What's in impartiality terms? And I'm very proud of the way we've navigated things like the COVID crisis, all the things that we've done there. With high impact content, I think we've had a good year. We saw Vigil. We've had some rather good things going on, and I don't want to get to. There's plenty of things we're restless about and want to improve. I can talk about that in terms of the priorities. But it's been a pretty decent year. Our numbers have held up. Reach to the BBC, if you want some of my propaganda, is 89% of people are still coming to the BBC. It's still pretty amazing, 18 hours a week. We've got work to do, but that's held up. Online iPlayer we can talk about. I think it's an excellent year. Excellent year. Sounds has grown to a reasonable scale. So I could go through it, and commercially we're doing okay. I mean, it's not been the easiest year to set tough commercial objectives, but we've got a very aggressive plan, and so far studios have hit all their numbers, and I'm very ambitious about where that business could go.
So all of that rolls up to the number one goal of delivering value to every household.
Yeah.
But the kind of but on that isn't that getting harder to deliver when you see that BBC can't compete on Olympics rights anymore and ends up with a reduced Olympics package? You lose Phoebe Waller-Bridge to Netflix. The value in either content that people must come to BBC to watch, they're now getting elsewhere, the talent drain that you're seeing. Do you feel that one day in the future we're going to reach a tipping point where the value just isn't there anymore because you don't have the scale and the funds to deliver it, and that tipping point means you can't point to the value to justify the license fee and it turns to dust? No, I don't think that's inevitable. It was a bleak portrait.
No, I don't think it's inevitable. I think it requires clarity of strategy, really clear focus on what you're trying to do, differentiation. Look, it's quite straightforward in some ways. This conference has done it for years, which is the internet strips away, the distribution of fixed distribution advantage of 2 out of 4 channels or whatever it was when we were, and suddenly you're into what differentiates you. What do we stand for? So why have I pushed a lot more money? We haven't mentioned that in terms of, I think it's been good this year in terms of the across the UK plan, where we're really pushing money out across the UK. Why? Because it differentiates us. The BBC does things. I mean, I've been very vocal about it. I like Netflix. They're an incredible company. They do well. I really admire Sky, but they're not the BBC. And I think we're lazy when we say with these comparisons sometimes. The drama we create, the news we deliver. I mean, Rodri probably mentioned it yesterday. The biggest show in the UK just about is the 6:30 news. You know this. This is local storytelling. But it does require real focus and objectivity on what we're better at than others and focusing on that.
So in that context, how do you see John Whittydale's announcement yesterday about Britishness in our content?
Well, I warm to it. But I don't think, I think Britishness, some of these words obviously get you into, I've had fun and games with flag waving and goodness knows what else, but you get into, it's a very simple thing to me, which is differentiation. We're great storytellers in the UK. We know it. This room knows it more than anyone. And we tell stories. We have an incredible heritage, which has global resonance. But what we should be doing is focusing on what we do differently and where we do it better. That's not to say that's not a lack of global ambition. It's really important that. We want global ideas, but the best ideas are local. They're centered in place. They have that integrity. I just want to make sure I create an environment in the BBC where those ideas, the threat to us is that, culturally we're not soaking up those ideas, finding new talent, getting the best when you see a normal people, you can write all the strategy in the world, but you just go, that's it. Yeah, and I think when we see it, we know it, and we just need to make sure culturally we're delivering as much as that's possible.
But isn't there a terrifying truth sort of staring down at all of us, which is that by 2030, the top 3 US streamers will be spending $200 billion a year on content?
Sure.
And where does that leave the BBC? Can you compete? Can BBC Studios, that obviously was your shop, can it be supercharged to perhaps borrow more and go out into the...
But I certainly think that scale is a factor, but it's not the only factor. And you also have to decide what games you're in. Yeah, whether you're into, what's the scale of ambition for your platforms, for your content, and we're clear on that, I think, in terms of what we want to do. So it requires incredible focus. But I think we've got enough scale to compete if we make our choices right. What I would say, by the way, is part of that is constructing partnerships. Again, Alex talked yesterday quite right. Constructing partnerships, making sure that we've got access to capital, making sure that, ideas should not be constrained by the ability to fund them. And I think we've got a major role to play. Editorially, we're very strong, by the way, as a nation, editorially. And that gives us incredible power. And not everyone goes to America and, it stays there, they come back. It's fluid to a point. I think we don't need to be too depressed about this.
The point you just made about partnerships. Yesterday, John Whittingdale described Project Kangaroo as a failed opportunity to create a homegrown Netflix. Do you think that failure was a sliding door moment for the BBC and UK PSBs?
I certainly think it was a moment we look back with regret. I don't think the game's gone. That's where I am. I think the trouble is, if you define the market on where it is, this is obvious. If you define the market on where it is now versus where it's going, and you make decisions based on that, I think we're in real trouble. I do think some of the debate in the UK is just too focused on itself. And at the end of the day, the other, I talked about the internet stripping away distribution advantage, it just makes it global in that way. Now, this offers creatively so many possibilities to, double down on what we do brilliantly and differently, and what not all global companies will do, or global American-based companies, because we do see ourselves as a global business, will find the economics that work for them in some of the things we're doing. We can make choices. Our model is different, and that's the wonder of it. And you've got to celebrate it. It's not a restraint. We don't have to. We're very lucky. We don't have to make a P&L work every day. So we can do things that, and this is a tension in the choices we make, and makes it quite difficult in terms of our resource allocation and prioritization, is we may choose to do things that are uneconomic because their public value and the long-term contribution to what we want to be as the BBC is so important.
And going back to the kangaroo point, do you feel that BritBox can in any way
I think BritBox,
substitute?
particularly internationally, in the UK it's working, but internationally in the US, many British executives have gone to the US with ambition and, returned slightly forlorn. Actually, BritBox, profitable, growing, we've got some scale on it now, relative scale, and I think that offers some real opportunity. I do think we're a moment where there's some really big choices for us in terms of, we're a very big distribution business, $500 million odd in content sales. At some point, what's your ambition to then flip into D2C? I think there are opportunities in terms of subscription news services. We've talked about that potentially in the US. I've got other ideas around that. But you've got to be clear about where your partners are and be ruthless about what's really going to work. Because everyone can say, look, let's just launch the iPlayer everywhere. But actually, if you look at the rights framework, if you look at going cold turkey on the studios business and what that means, it's quite a balanced decision. It's an easy line, but it's quite a balanced decision. So
perhaps this is a good moment to ask you, what are the priorities now for year 2?
Well, obviously, the first thing is, I think I'm a real believer in consistency. So those 4, alongside across the UK, will just keep going, yeah? If I had some themes that sit above them in terms of really delivering value, I think there's a couple of things for the BBC this year. One is the obvious, but it's just creative ambition. I kind of just think, we've got one life, let's just have some fun. And I think it's been a hell of a year. I think people can feel beleaguered, we can talk about all the problems. At the end of the day, there's nothing that works better in my life than when we've got commissioning or a radio station that is just bringing ideas forth, really enjoying the multiple views in society, the creative possibilities, the talent coming through. I want people to take more swings. I want to take more risk in the right way. Yeah.
Risk and the BBC aren't necessarily
habitual
bedfellows.
Well, I'm not sure that, Deborah, I'm not sure that's true because we are lucky because our funding model, and we can debate the quantum and all of that, but our funding model does enable us not to be just driven by, I ran radio for a while. What a joy. Because you can just go, let's just do that. We don't need to worry about what ad revenue is coming through in that hour. Yeah? And we're not satisfying commercial interest. So surely if you work for the BBC, the one thing you want to be doing is say, when I look back on my time, I've had the most amazing creative period, and look at the work I mean, I suspect we won't remember the policy Zoom calls. I suspect we'll remember the work, yeah? So I think I really want that focus, and I'm going to be unrelenting on with everyone to really dial up the creative energies in the BBC. And by the way, that's not from a position of weakness. Everyone's saying, you know. Second thing for me is just continuing to reform the organisation. You know, again, everyone talks about it, but culture is everything. It's you can have me talking at the top, but what's the experience of a leader on the ground in the BBC? What's the quality of support that the staff get? How inclusive is the environment? Does everyone really feel they belong? Is it a truly diverse environment in all that means? I want to move the culture on the BBC.
How do you do that whilst also pushing out really significant job cuts? You've taken 1,200 jobs out in your first year.
Yeah, well, it's been tough on that. So we've lost 12, you know, we're 1,200 smaller in public service in a year. And I do feel we need to drive change. I think that you just have to be very, very clear with where you're heading, what your strategy is. You have to be kind. By the way, kindness doesn't mean making everything nice. It's just being really clear and making sure we've got the right career development for people. Also creating environments where everyone really can thrive and belong. And it's actually, I think we've got so much to do in terms of the healthy paranoia of the market, that when you get to work, you need proper leadership, clear accountability, and we need to just get on with it. I'm not a big one for internal politics. It's exhausting. I've done it before in corporations, and I find it wholly depressing. If you come into work worried about each other and all that nonsense, I just cannot stomach it. Yeah. I feel very passionate about it. And I think the other thing is I want leaders, if we're paying leaders to lead, they have to be accountable, and we are responsible for our actions. You know, hold us to account. I feel very strongly about it. But I really think we can move. There's some wonderful. This is not, again, from a point of view that the BBC has a bad rap, I think, sometimes in terms of the culture, because people come in there, they're pleasantly surprised. It's a wonderful place. There's some brilliant people. I just think, you know, we can move it on a bit in a really exciting way.
Okay, in a moment, we're going to come to some questions from the audience. So if you've got questions, please get them ready. I just want to turn to a couple of more stories coming out from yesterday, really. I want to touch on some of what your chairman, Richard Sharp, was saying here on this stage. He said, if the BBC didn't exist today, you wouldn't reinvent it. I think that was kind of a punchy thing to say.
Absolutely right. Do I agree with my chairman? Absolutely.
But does that mean there's no market for it? There wouldn't be an appetite for it? If you could
I've said that many times. Of course we wouldn't invent it. You wouldn't invent the BBC now. But I wouldn't invent many things I think are the most precious, wonderful things. The one thing I would say is that I think if you look at a dare I say, macroeconomic level, and Richard was talking about this as well in terms of what we might call unrestrained capitalism, or this idea that you look for models where, what's the right intervention with public money, legislation? I think it's really interesting, because I think that if you can create, you know, in this weird and wonderful country that I love to bits, you've got free museums, yeah? You've got other elements which the BBC, and I come back to it, I think we should all be really fighting for this mixed ecology of public intervention and private commercial growth. And the story in terms of commercial growth is fantastic. I mean, I'm chair of the Creative Industries Council. We just do not talk about it. And the one thing the culture sector has got is one of the most important economic sectors to manage. It's huge. It's over $1 billion in GVA, growing fast. So my view is you wouldn't invent it now. You wouldn't invent it now. But by goodness, I wouldn't change it.
Okay, thank you. Good. Brackets, long answer. We're going to go to the audience now.
I know what the questions are going to be like. That's why I'm talking out.
Oh, yeah, you were filibustering. Are there any questions out there in the audience? Any hands up? Yep, over here. Thank you. Please say your name before you ask.
Good morning, Tim. Chris Curtis from Broadcast. At the risk of asking you to comment on your chairman's position, I wonder if you believe that the potential privatisation of Channel 4 is a little local issue.
I think the comments were slightly misinterpreted, if I may. Because if you listen to Alex, you listen to Richard, you listen to, and what I believe is, no one's saying that there's not a need to change. We all you need to reform. You've got to worry about on demand. We talked about, we've got a huge focus on iPlayer, just as Alex has got on all four. So I do think that it's really important to set these challenges in a global context. That's the first point. The BBC's position is really clear, by the way, and we are all aligned, which is we don't have a position on the ownership structure of Channel 4. Yeah? We don't. What we do care about is what I've been droning on at length, thank you for the feedback, Deborah, about the wonders of a PSB ecology.
Yeah, you've spoken about the
it's a wonderful thing, and,
yeah.
and the way Channel 4 has supported the independent community,
yep.
It can get to places we can't get to, all those things are precious, and we play with them at our peril, and we all agree that.
Okay.
I'll stop there because you'll give me a look.
Thank you.
Right.
Well, there's a clock there. Look, and I've got one more question. There's one up there, top left there. Thank you. Are we allowed to run a minute or two over? No.
No.
Oh. Okay, you've got 1:06.
Oh dear, quick question then. Katie Bolton from the Disabled Artists Networking Community. You spoke about your 4 main priorities, and I think you added a 5th about representation of the whole of the UK. With Jack Thorne's Edinburgh McTaggart ringing in all of our ears, would you consider a 6th priority, specifically around the representation of our deaf and disabled communities on and behind our screens?
Huge priority for us. In some ways, they were the value for audiences priority, sorry, in my world, in terms of what we're trying to do. And then we've got a reformed organisation and what we need to do. And utterly central to that, and I know you probably know, we're doing a lot of work on disability initiatives, recent announcement with Netflix in some of the work we're doing on production. I am dissatisfied with our progress, particularly with regard to, I've set some tough targets, the 50-20-12 targets, gender, BAME, and disability. I actually have been a bit restless around it this year, and I think you'll see some serious change. It's a big priority.
Should it be on your list of priorities that we went over? Because it wasn't there when we discussed.
No, I think it's support. You see, my view is, when you talk about impartiality, all those things, they should be underpinned by a culture and organisation that does that. It is wholly reformed. So that, and by the way, I think the BBC's got an outstanding record of portrayal. And we could put stuff that we've done, really made a change. The really big thing, that a number of people have talked about it, is within production, decision-making forum, everything has to change. And that is in some ways the 5th thing underlying everything that I've been saying, which is what kind of organisation we are. It's really important, and I think we've got some progress to make.
Okay, my final question was going to be, you're famously a long-distance trail runner. Does that endurance help with the job?
Absolutely. Yeah, you need to, in this job, you need to escape at times, I'm telling you that. So, definitely.
A good run this weekend then?
Yeah.
Long one?
It'll be a long one this weekend, yeah.
Okay. Tim Davie, Director General, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Deborah.